Hi everybody. I would like to speak about the types of social casework practice. Social casework has twofold purpose. One, to address the needs of persons in different situations, and two, to bring about the desired change in the person's life. The focal point of casework practice is to create sustainable, positive changes in the life of individuals, which will in turn make positive impact on the society. The primary objective of this lecture is to give a glimpse into the various types of social casework practices. At the end of my talk, you will understand the types of problems or issues faced by the client, the magnitude and dynamics of the problem, and the different types of interventions that address the problem. Social work profession is unique because it is not derived from nor a handmaid of any other discipline. It has evolved over time as a helping profession which has a blend of theory with practice. The foundation of social work is based on humanitarian values. The well-being of human being is of paramount importance in this profession. Moreover, theories related to social work ponder on the psychosocial problems faced by individuals and help them cope with the problem situations. In the backdrop of this perspective, casework practice has developed into certain types of intervention based on some factors such as the nature of problem, the urgency of the problem situation, the personality of the individual, the rapid changes in the environment, the inner dynamics of the individual's family, and so on. Let me mention the functions of caseworker in the process and purpose of interventions. In the process of casework practice, the caseworker makes use of professional skills such as observation, description, evaluation, interpretation of the problem situation of the person who is in need of help, plans the types of interventions, enables the person or the client to go through a process that helps the person to modify his or her behavior and make the necessary adjustments. He or she applies generally recognized professional social work principles, methods, and procedures in order to prevent effectively, handle appropriately, or eliminate completely an individual's emotional or mental or social dysfunction. When basic needs of individuals remain unmet, differences or deviations in the behavior of the individual arise which disturb his or her normal functioning. While working with individuals, not just the physical component, but the emotional and intellectual growth and development of every individual need to be taken into consideration. Individuals in the society have different roles to play, and while performing them, they face problems in many forms which block their performance as a social being. Individuals are different, and so is the nature of their problems. It varies from one person to another, and therefore intervention modes cannot be of the same approach. They should be tailor-made to suit the needs of the individual and his or her problems. Let us now look at the types of social casework. The practice of social casework varies in its typology depending upon the various factors such as the nature of the person with a problem, intensity of the problem, required duration of the intervention, the expected outcome, availability of resources, and so on. All types of problems can be viewed from three different levels: the micro, the meso, and macro. This sort of outlook would help in conceptualizing appropriate methods of intervention in addressing any kind of issues or problems. There are, therefore, different types of social casework practices. Let me say something about each type of social casework. Let me begin with a long-term casework. As it is evident from the name, the process of this casework has a long duration and provides assistance for a long period of time. Even in the process of long-term casework, when there is a lack of insight regarding the problem, it may give a lot of trouble to the client. Long-term casework requires working with the clients for a longer duration, wherein the caseworker actively engages in a contractual working relationship with the client. The client meets a particular caseworker at regular intervals, and progress is made through planned interventions. Example of long-term casework includes working with drug addicts, alcoholics, and individuals having behavioral problems. The nature of problems handled in long-term casework usually requires a more systematic and durable intervention, which implies regular meetings with the person or the client over a period of time. Short-term casework. Short-term casework is also known as brief casework practice. It is an innovative approach in the practice of casework and is a response to the changing social needs and commitments, revisiting our basic assumptions, conceptual models, and operating principles followed in traditional practice. Brief casework treatment has been inherent in the very nature of casework theory, which has embedded in it some sense of clear purpose and limit. Let me describe the features and utility of short-term casework. Short-term casework helps to solve problems faced by the client within a short period. It is time-bound and the focus is largely on alleviating the problem at hand. It works more closely in the areas of family setting. Lack of awareness and information regarding the nature of the problem may give a lot of trouble to the client. In short-term casework, continuity is important to solve the problem. For example, casework interventions with individuals and families in a sudden stressful situation such as diagnosis of life-threatening condition, terminal illness, poor academic progress, or financial instability definitely need systematic follow-up. Let me explain the process involved in short-term casework approach. While working with individuals and families, the caseworker can engage in short-term interventions to cater to the immediate need of the individual and the family in addressing the problem at hand. The caseworker intervenes immediately to gather necessary information about the situation and its impact. He or she provides required services which help the individuals and families to understand and accept the realities of their situation, to get linked with the necessary resources and solve the immediate problem. The caseworker makes home visits and renders referral services. He or she ensures confidentiality by not disclosing any sensitive information about the client and the problem without the client's consent. Now I am going to tell you about a planned short-term approach which is known as task-centered casework practice. Task-centered casework is based on the psychoanalytic perspective. It is considered as a problem-solving model. The process of task-centered casework has a sharp focus and ensures continuity. The efficacy of this approach basically depends on two things. The person who has a problem should be willing to work on a specific aspect of his or her problem, and the problem should be such that it should be manageable to both the caseworker and the client. Task-centered approach can be viewed as atheoretical, which means that it is not so much adhering to a set of top-down theoretical principles, but connected to real-life application. In other words, it works on specific and practical elements of people's lives. Hence, it is considered as a bottom-up process that is based on an assumption of cause and effect. Let me briefly point out the theoretical base of this type, the task-centered casework. The person who has a problem needs to target the problem that is to be immediately attended to. He should not only acknowledge the problem, but willing to work on it and solve it within a specified time. The target problem could be some form of distress, turbulence, uneasiness, malfunction, or threat to one's goal. Hence, what the person is supposed to do is a task which is an immediate goal and at the same time a means to alleviate his or her problem. Let me outline the characteristics of task-centered casework. Task-centered casework is time-bound. It is present-oriented as it addresses the problem at hand. Intervention is focused on alleviating a specific problem which both the caseworker and the person or the client agree to work on. The process is highly structured and the procedure for following the model is rather specific. The focus is on solving the problem as perceived by the person who wants to solve his or her problem. Client should carry out the tasks agreed upon, and the entire casework revolves around these tasks. Task-centered casework takes to an empirical approach, and it develops from research findings about its practice. This model has been built up with concepts that can be researched in an ongoing manner. Task-centered casework is effective with children having difficulty in coping with the academic demands, persons having consistent difficulty in completing work at a specified time frame, persons experiencing stressful interpersonal relationships, individuals having difficulty in performing their social roles effectively, and persons affected by sudden social transitions due to natural disaster or ecological problem or violence or war. Task-centered casework can be applicable to almost all types of people, namely individuals, couples, families and groups. The initial sessions are focused on assessment of the problem of the person. This phase is characterized by identifying, listing, and prioritizing of the problems and agreeing upon the achievable goal. These goals are then broken into smaller and more specific objectives. Suitable strategies and tasks are drawn up to achieve the specific goal, and thus the prioritized problem could be solved. Let me underline the usefulness of task-centered casework. Task-centered casework takes to a pragmatic approach. It is able to get a quick and tangible result provided the person agrees to work on a particular dimension of his or her problem under the expert guidance of the caseworker. It can be useful with clients of any number as long as their problems can be identified, prioritized, and turned into achievable goals. Once an easily manageable or achievable goal is obtained and a specific dimension of a problem is solved, it paves the way for the client to get motivated and to work on the other dimensions of his or her problem. Let me mention a few limitations of this type of casework. Task-centered casework may not be effective in the life of some persons who have certain cultural mindset that comes in the way of owning responsibility for the problem and willing to work on the solution of the problem. For example, in a culture where every problem is meekly accepted as for part of one's fate and nothing could solve the problem situation, it will be very difficult to apply this model effectively. It may not be helpful to apply task-centered casework in multiple client systems as it is difficult to negotiate reciprocal goals. I am now referring to another type known as crisis intervention casework. Gerald Kaplan describes a crisis situation as involving a relatively short period of psychological disequilibrium in a person who confronts a hazardous situation that for him constitutes an important problem which he can for the time being neither escape nor solve with his customary problem-solving resources. Casework interventions that address such instances and individuals are known as crisis intervention casework. Crisis intervention casework is relevant in situations such as the following: accident, death of a loved one, natural disaster like tsunami, floods, volcanic eruption, famine, cyclone, rain, and fire, serious health-related issues, illness, financial crisis, unemployment, unexpected pregnancy. Interventions consist of assisting the individual or the family in solving the current problem by learning better and hopefully healthier ways of coping with the hazardous circumstances. Crisis intervention, therefore, focuses on the immediate problem situation, not on long-standing disorders or well-established character patterns. In the crisis intervention model, the caseworker aims at enhancing the ability of the person to cope with the current problem of living. Intervention is for the specific problems of interpersonal conflict, role dysfunction, and provisions for life. Conflicts which are either conscious or akin to conscious are worked upon. Transference is recognized and handled. Assessment is focused on the client's position in the family and in community. In crisis situation, social workers need to work very fast in responding to the needs of the client involving quick decision making. Often the case worker takes up the role of an advocate and activist. Let me explain another type of social casework, namely the preventive casework. Preventive casework is largely focused on working with clients to prevent the occurrence of an undesirable behavior or consequence. The word preventive denotes the direction of the casework practice. The caseworker is actively involved in providing information, creating awareness, enabling clarified thinking and empowered decision making among the clients to effectively avoid disruptive modes of operation. The target population usually involves vulnerable clients who are at risk, such as women, children, elderly, disabled, marginalized people. Preventive casework practice is concerned with persons addicted to bad or unhealthy habits like substance abuse, binge drinking, smoking, suffering from problems due to unhealthy relationship, psychological distress, and domestic violence. Preventive casework can be either long-term method or short-term method depending on the problem, but the ultimate goal is to prevent the problem. Environmental modification is important to increase the positive dimensions of the existing situation of the client and decrease the negativity of the situation. Environmental modification is a good technique to solve the problem faced by the client, but it takes a lot of time and sufficient follow-ups. The caseworker needs the support of the family members in helping the client. This will help the client to function normally in the society. I would like to point out the significance of sustainable change that is brought about through the process of social casework practice. Social casework practice is geared towards change in the life of the person who has some problem in the personal and social dimensions of his or her life. Once the desired change occurs in the life of the individual, it is to be maintained and reinforced, as the ultimate purpose is to stabilize and sustain the change in his or her life for effective functioning and greater well-being. It focuses on sustainable change among the persons with whom it is working and in their immediate social environment. Social casework practice builds up the capacity of the individuals to play an active role in addressing their own problem situation and accept responsibility for continued growth. Social work utilizes a professional approach in addressing social issues and accelerates the process of social change. Sustainable change helps the social caseworkers to be proactive and keep a positive outlook on the process as they come across a variety of problems in different situations. Thus, the underlying belief is that through an effective process of casework, positive change is possible in the problem situation of an individual, and that desired change can be sustainable. Let me sum up. Casework is a problem-solving method which is task-oriented and focused on addressing any kind of issues or problems and follows a systematic procedure in solving them. It is an effective method that helps clients to understand their own problems and become empowered to solve them through a process. Social casework practice consists of different types of approach, namely task-centered, crisis intervention, preventive, short-term intervention, and long-term intervention. Let me sign off now and hope to meet you in another session. Thank you.